Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey guys, welcome back. Today we will be talking about the Idaho 4 case. I've seen it around a lot, but have never gotten into it until a subscriber suggested doing a video on it. So let's hop into it. So just a little background and past history prior to this incident. A lot of the students lived on an off-campus home in Moscow, Idaho. It was a 3-story home, 6 bedrooms, 2 on each floor, pretty simple. The history is prior to the event, there was no murders in the city since 2015. So, the event. In the early morning of November 13th, 2022, 4 University of Idaho college students were stabbed to death in a shared rental home close to campus. Madison Mogan, 21, and Xana Kernodle, 20, who lived in the shared home. Kaylee Gonzalez, 21, who had recently moved out but returned to attend a nearby party. Lastly, there was Ethan Chapin, 20, who was Xana's boyfriend, who was sleeping over on the night of the attacks. There was 2 other female roommates who lived at the house, but they were not attacked. So, earlier on the evening of November 12th, 2 of the 4 victims, Ethan and Xana, were reportedly at an on-campus party at the nearby Sigma Chi fraternity from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m., and they returned home around 1:45 a.m. That evening, the other 2 victims, Madison and Kaylee, had gone to the Corner Club, a downtown sports bar, at 10 p.m., from which they departed at 1:30 a.m. A live stream video on Twitch by the Grub Truck, a food truck 4 blocks from the Friendship Square, showed them at 1:41 a.m. chatting and smiling, getting their food 10 minutes later, and leaving to take what the police initially said was an Uber ride home, which was about 1 mile away. The police later rephrased their statement to say the ride was provided by a private party, arriving home at 1:56 a.m. According to the surviving roommates, the 4 students were home by 2 a.m. 7 unanswered phone calls were made from the phone of Kaylee to her former longtime boyfriend, a fellow student, from 2:26 to 2:52 a.m., and 3 unanswered calls were made from Madison's phone to the same person from 2:44 to 2:52 a.m. These calls were investigated with the police, concluding they did not believe the recipient of the missed calls was involved in the crime. A DoorDash order labeled for Xana was delivered to the house around 4 a.m. The 2 surviving roommates had allegedly returned home by 1 a.m. Original reports stated both surviving roommates were in their beds on the ground floor at the time of the killings. They were not attacked and not held hostage, and that neither woke up during the killings. However, the probable cause written statement for the case said that one surviving roommate stated she was sleeping on the 2nd floor, the same floor as Xana and Ethan, before she awakened by what sounded like Kaylee and her dog. She stated she later heard a roommate saying something to the effect of, "There's someone here." The roommate stated she believed this was said by Kaylee, although investigators also believed this might have been Xana speaking, as a related download of her phone showed that she was on TikTok at 4:12 a.m. The surviving roommate stated she opened the door twice within a short span of time, and the second time heard what sounded like crying coming from Xana's room and a male voice saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Security cameras near the home picked up the sound of whimpering, a loud thud, and a dog barking numerous times starting around 4:17 a.m. The surviving roommate allegedly opened the door a 3rd time and saw a figure in black clothing and a mask that covered his mouth and nose walking towards her. The man, whom the roommate stated she did not recognize, walked past her and used a sliding glass door to exit. The roommate stated she stood in a frozen shock phase and then locked herself in her room. The victims were stabbed to death on the second and third floors in the home where they had been in bed. They were not gagged or restrained, and the walls at the scene were splattered with blood. Madison and Kaylee were found in Madison's bedroom, and Xana and Ethan were found in Xana's room. No 911 calls were made until 11:58 a.m., many hours after the early morning killings. The call made at the time requested aid for an unconscious person and was placed from within the residence using the cell phone of one of the surviving roommates. When police arrived, the door to the home was open. There was no sign of forced entry or damage inside the home, and nothing appeared to be missing. The two surviving roommates were in the residence when police arrived, as were other friends of the victims. The surviving roommates had allegedly called friends over to the home because they believed one of the second floor victims was unconscious and was not waking up. The identity of the 911 caller was not released, but police confirmed the caller was not considered a suspect. All four victims were pronounced dead at noon. Detectives stated they believed the killings occurred sometime between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. That morning, officers came upon Kaylee's dog alive and unharmed at the house. So, the after response. On the evening of November 13th, the university canceled all classes for November 14th. They also scheduled a candlelight vigil to be held at the administration building lawn on the evening of November 16th. To then, they postponed it 2 weeks. From the day of the killings, investigators initially said that there was no risk to the community. 3 days later, however, Moscow Police Chief James Fry said, "We cannot say that there is no threat to the community." Fall break was scheduled to begin after November 18th, with classes resuming on November 28th. Many students and other Moscow residents, not trusting the initial assurances from the police and fearing for their own safety, began an early Thanksgiving holiday leave from the area. Other residents who stayed were anxious and cautious, and a few professors even canceled their classes. Due to weather concerns, the candlelit vigil was moved indoors to the Kibbe Dome and held on the evening of November 30th. The fathers of Kaylee and Ethan criticized the limited flow of information from the police and university to the families of the victims. TikTokers, self-proclaimed sidekicks, and social media users began to speculate and spread rumors and misinformation about the case on social media. In response, the Moscow Police Department criticized internet detectives for creating rampant online rumors and disrupting investigations, and in a December 2nd news release said, "There is speculation without factual backing, stoking community fears and spreading false facts." Moscow Police Captain Roger Lanier said tracking down rumors and quelling rumors about specific information and specific events that may not have happened is a huge distraction. We are not releasing specific details as we do not want to compromise the investigation. They also warned that people harassing and threatening those potentially involved with the case would face criminal charges. I just want to say before we move on is I am sorry if the rest of the video is loud. It is 70 degrees and it's supposed to reach 90 where I live, so it is very hot. So I do apologize. So, the investigation. The investigation of the stabbings was conducted by the Moscow Police Department, supported by the Idaho State Police and the Latah County Sheriff's Office. In all, almost 130 members of the law enforcement from the three agencies worked on the case. Autopsies on the four victims were performed in Spokane, Washington. The Latah County coroner stated the victims all appeared to have been stabbed multiple times by a large knife, if not the same knife, very similar ones. At least one victim appeared to have tried to fend off their attacker, and the victims may have been attacked while sleeping in their beds. None showed signs of sexual assault. All 4 deaths were deemed homicide by stabbing. The victims were not tied and gagged. No weapon has been recovered, although the police believe the killer or killers used a fixed blade knife. A surviving roommate who reportedly saw the suspect described him as a male stranger around 5 feet 10 inches and not very muscular but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. On November 19th, police requested the public provide any video of the house that had been recorded the night of the killings. A phone tip line and email were created for students and others to submit potential evidence to officials. As of December 5th, it was reported that there had been more than 2,600 email tips, 2,700 phone calls, and 1,000 digital media submissions from the public to these tip lines. On December 24th, the investigative team reported having received at least 15,000 tips regarding the case. The police initially left open the possibility that there could have been more than one perpetrator. Police stated that they believed it was a targeted attack, but have not concluded if the target was the residence or its occupant. In a November 23rd press conference, the Moscow police chief said that authorities had received a number of tips, including that Kaylee allegedly had a stalker, but were unable to verify that claim or identify any such individual at that time. After receiving hundreds of tips from the public, on December 15th, police announced they were searching records of approximately 22,000 fifth-generation Hyundai Elantras made between 2011 and 2013. A camera in the area captured video of a white or light-colored Elantra around the time of the murders, which investigators noticed had made multiple passes along the same route near the residence. Another surveillance recording obtained by investigators also showed an Elantra passing by the victim's home 3 times, beginning around 2:29 a.m. At 4:04 a.m., the Elantra returned to the home for a 4th time. At 4:20 a.m., the car was seen speeding away from the victim's neighborhood. Investigators in neighboring Pullman, Washington, also university town, began an investigation into a white Elantra belonging to a 28-year-old PhD candidate and teaching assistant named Brian Koberger, who drove it with his father home to the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania for the holidays. Brian's Elantra was of a later year than the original police description. Brian was pulled over twice within a nearly 5-mile radius by Indiana State Police on Interstate 70 outside Greenfield, Indiana, allegedly for following too close or tailgating. The FBI denied allegations that they had directed the Indiana State Police to make the stops. Investigators obtained cell phone data that showed that Brian's phone stopped connecting to the network around 2:47 a.m. in Pullman on November 13th before reconnecting around 4:48 a.m. near Blaine, Idaho, which is near the U.S. Highway 95 south of Moscow. Cell phone data also show that his phone utilized a cell tower near the victim's residence around 9 a.m. on November 13th, approximately 5 hours after the killings. Police also obtained data that indicated that his phone pinged from a cell phone tower nearest the residence at least 12 times between June 2022 and November 13th. Investigators had obtained 3 unidentified male DNA samples from the crime scene, including DNA found on a tan leather knife blade on Madison's bed. Using a public genealogy database, authorities reportedly identified a partial match to an individual with a familial connection to Brian. Investigators recovered trash from outside Brian's family home in Pennsylvania for DNA, which they stated was consistent with being the source of the DNA from the blade. Before the arrest, investigators monitored Brian outside of his parents' Pennsylvania home. He was allegedly seen multiple times wearing surgical gloves and observed putting trash bags inside of the garbage can of a neighbor. The items were sent to the Idaho State Lab for testing. Authorities also said Brian had cleaned his car inside and outside, not missing an inch. According to authorities, a search of the home where Brian was arrested revealed a knife, a pistol, and a black face mask, as well as ID cards inside a glove inside a box. That was a tongue twister. Brian was taken into custody by an FBI SWAT team and Pennsylvania State Police on December 30th at the home of his parents in Monroe County, Pennsylvania. At the time of his arrest, authorities allegedly found Brian in the kitchen dressed in a shirt and shorts while wearing examination gloves and putting trash into separate Ziploc baggies. Now the arrest. On December 30th, 2022, Brian was arrested on 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 felony count of burglary. He was arraigned a public defender and was detained without bond on the Monroe County Correctional Facility in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. On his return to the county courthouse on January 3rd, 2023, he agreed to extradition, which is pretty much deportation. On January 4th, he was flown to Pullman, driven to the Lada County Jail in Moscow, and held without bail. Brian made his first appearance in the Lada County Courthouse on January 5th and was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary for breaking into a home with the intent to commit a felony. 1 week later, on January 12th, Brian made his second appearance for a status conference in the same room at the courthouse. Now lastly, the indictment and arraignment. On May 17, 2023, the Lada County District Court announced that Brian was indicted by a grand jury on 5 charges, 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. An initial probable cause hearing scheduled for June 26 was canceled after the indictment. In May 2023, Brian refused to enter a plea during his arraignment. His attorney said that he was standing silent on the charges. The judge entered a not guilty plea for him. That makes my blood boil. Why not guilty? On June 26, the Lada County Prosecutor's Office announced they were seeking the death penalty given the alleged aggravating circumstances of the first-degree murder charges. Brian is being held in the Lada County Jail and has been denied bond. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. In January 2024, the judge hearing the case granted the defense access under seal the results of the investigative genetic genealogy testing, which used a touch sample from the blade of the knife left behind at the crime scene, which first led to the investigation of Brian. Unfortunately, there has been no trial set date known.